A very warm welcome in the third session, in the afternoon session of our MaaS Symposium, the 5th edition of the MaaS Symposium. This year, due to the circumstances, it's a virtual conference that we have decided to organize. So the topic of this year's MaaS conference is mastering the balance between competition and collaboration in the MaaS ecosystem. As we all understand, bringing mobility forward, organizing mobility, new mobility modes is not a one institution endeavor. It really requires working together across different institutions, across private and public entities. And today we have already looked at different aspects of ecosystem and different aspects of how we can balance the collaboration and the competition factor. So in the early morning session, we looked at how such an ecosystem can be framed, how it can be visualized so it becomes more clear who are the actors, what are the relationships and the roles they play. The early afternoon, we had a session on value flows. We really looked into what type of exchange we can manage between the stakeholders, from financial funding flows, monetary, non-monetary funds, but also we spent quite some time on the topic of data exchange, how data has to be moving between institutions or being collected, maybe even data lakes, in order to understand where we are, where we want to go to, and to improve the ecosystem. Independent if we talk about urban contexts, suburban or rural areas. The first two topics were really about establishment and building up a functioning system, a functioning ecosystem, so mobility can work and people can travel in the best possible way from A to B across different modes and geographic regions. What we're looking now in the third session is about what we call empowering the transition. So what we're looking into is it's good to have everything established, but if we look at our environmental goals that we have promised to achieve regarding CO2 emissions, sustainability and so on, then we still have quite some leverage to take, quite some journey to travel. And the question we want to raise now is, where do we want to head to and how can we do that? And in order to do this, we have a fantastic group of speakers with us this afternoon. So we start with an inspirational talk with Alexander Chulok. He's director at the Center of Science and Technology Foresight at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. He also holds positions associate professor as well as deputy director for studies, for statistical studies. So that's his expertise. He really will give us some foresight inputs on that side. And once we have given some views onto how the future might look like or how we might see the future, we will then open up to a panel discussion. And here we have on one side, Isabelle Vandoorne. She's with the European Commission since many years, since 2001. She's deputy head of the Sustainable and Intelligent Transport Department at DG Move, focusing on multimodal passenger transportation, including also mobility as a service, as well as sustainable transportation. Lukas Ertl is from the Organization of Economic Relations. He's a special project director there, managing different types of projects in the urban context, for example, urban air transportation, looking at different aspects of regulation, passenger rights to technology, bringing these future topics forward. He also oversees the mobility, the Urban Mobility Lab, which is a co-creation space, bringing different types of stakeholders together, moving transportation, for example, or mobility forward. And last but not least, we have Katharina Rogenhofer. She's spokesperson of the Referendum on Climate Change in Austria. She was also initiating Fridays for Future initiative in Vienna in Austria. And before that, she was working on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we have a great set of distinct experts we're looking forward to have an exchange with. And before we get started, So before I get started, we will just give you an overview of how we have set up the system. So all of the audience will be able to listen in and hear about the presentations. Any questions you might have, we have set up a Q&A panel. You find the link on the bottom of your system. So please, if you have questions, keep them short, keep them focused, and ideally also address a person that you want to have answering this question. If there's any technical issue that you might have, there's a chat. Also, you can find on the bottom part of the Zoom tool, and Steffi will get back to you and help you if there's anything that has to be solved. There might be a poll coming up, so if there's any question that we want to see how the audience also thinks about this, then we might also include a poll into our discussion and get sort of live feedback from that side. And last but not least, we will record this session just for you to be aware of it. And with that, I hand over now to our inspirational speaker, Alexander Chulok. Please, the floor or the presentation is yours.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Thanks a lot. It's an honor to be here and to join you. Well, for sure, I'd like to join you in Vienna, but you've got another level of mobility for me, and I can join everyone via internet. So just give me 1 second to start my presentation for you. Okay, so I hope everyone could take a look.
Yes, we did.
So, all right, wonderful. So, well, basically, I'm an economist by my nature, and we're doing a lot of different foresights for agro sector, for climate change, space, oil and gas, and other sectors of economy. And I'd like to share a few ideas, maybe not about mobility as itself from its side. You really have fantastic people who could tell you everything about mobility and the future of mobility, but maybe the ideas of drivers, factors, challenges, trends that could hamper or maybe boost the mobility as itself. But before I start, I'd like to share with you a few funny pictures. The view of mobility, which is around 120 years. And my first question to everybody is, do you think that it's really easy to do foresight or a forecast, which will be not maybe 100% precise, but more or less? These are pictures from previous century, which the best people from science and design and education draw, and that's the idea. What will be the smart city, for example, in millennium? So this picture is 120 years old. You can see flying cars and maybe some people are walking quite freely, and ask yourself, is it a really smart city that we face now, starting 20 years from the period that they decide it will be in a real life? While from flying mobility, I'd like to switch to water mobility. It's a whale bus, the same authors who think that everybody could join such trip. And you see here is a driver here, so it's not a driverless bus, but anyway, whale is pushing it forward and forward. Well, I guess maybe the last or previous the last funny picture that I'd like to share with you. It's a smart house which is rolling at the countryside. You see as well, I'm not sure that this is really ecologically free fire here, but anyway, it's quite good food, and it's Villa Berceau, and it's rolling. So my first idea and my first message is that when we're trying to think about the future, when we're trying to do foresight, first step should be not from the from our present to the future, not trying to extrapolate some trends, but to see what trends shape the future and then get back to our reality. In this context, I'd like to give you an interesting idea answering the question, what really constitutes modern decision making. So here are 50 years observations of Nobel Prize winners for economics. And you can see how these Nobel Prizes were moving from pure mathematics and different dynamic models, including models of theory, equilibrium, allocation of resources, more than 30 years ago, to human behavior, ideas about institutions and institutional changes, and influence of technological innovations. This is one of the nearest Nobel Prize winner, Paul Romert and Nordhaus. I think you know them in depth. And we can see from our projects and from the whole landscape that the demand for forecasts and macroeconomic environment is moving forward. We see the increase for efficiency and competitiveness. And more than 20 years ago, we know that the conception of global challenges and ground responses were identified and trying to be implemented into the whole policy making, which requires a good policy mix for our actions. And I think as a foresight and when we do different foresights, that we move to three foresights and forecasts about the future should be ethical, ecosystemic, and ecological. From this point, and yeah, if you compare once again Nobel Prize winners of economics, you see that maybe we should move from pure ideas of optimization or trying to find some mathematical models to more complex and sophisticated ideas of what constitutes the future. And I'll try to share with you and to show you a few pictures. In this context, we use in our center in the High School of Economics, we use a blended foresight methodology. So we go through different evidence-based methods like mathematical models, balancing models, econometrics, statistics. For sure, we use expertise and expert networking. We've got more than 10,000 experts on our board, I mean, in our database, and use them for different projects. It's very important to look into creative methods, say for wildcards and weak signals. The pandemic and what we see now could be identified like a wildcard for the whole policymakers and stakeholders. And we use big data analysis, which could be in blended methodology, very good basics for our forecasts and foresights. Well, preparing for this presentation, I used our intelligent foresight analytics. It includes the top 5 world smart systems. We've got more than 350 million different documents on board and more than 30,000 documents uploaded daily, including different research articles from Science and Scopus, patent analysis, analytical reports, etc., etc. We use a neural network, semantic analysis, and other different methods of artificial intelligence to identify different trends, drivers, and markers. And preparing to this presentation, asked I4A, all right, I4A, please give me the semantic map for global trends. Well, frankly, we don't have voice recognition yet, so I've got a call to my colleagues and say, right, guys, I need a perfect slide for this, and I'd like to share it with you. First, we got a basic structure of global challenges as an input to the system. We identify 6 different global challenges here. It's quite close to what United Nations is doing in their sustainable goals. Economic and structural challenges, social, environmental, values, technological, and political institutions. And you see that on our input, they were quite obvious, I think, like loss of biodiversity, climate change, rejection or changing of new institutions, emerging of new technologies, demand for for food or economic globalization, or maybe now it will be localization. We'll see. And what we've got with OiER is a semantic map. How to read this? Each cluster means that the topics and threads are close to each other, and the same color. We've got the same trends as well. And the bigger the trend is, that the more sufficient it is. And we use neural network to go to this map. It's just a screenshot from the whole system. And I'd like to stress your attention on a few trends that I think should be very important to mobility as a service, or maybe just mobility as it is. So let's go clockwise. And the first group is a group of trends about emerging disease, not only COVID, but maybe other types of viruses, searching for immune status sensor, and trends that are very important for all of us as a healthy life. I think that they will influence the idea and the topic of mobility sufficiently. If we go down, we see that a growing population and growing elderly population is also a very important trend. And how could we provide mobility for those people is very important. As you know, by 2050, the number of people who are 80 years old should triple. But anyway, it's growing, it's raising. And how could we use this demand and provide social services for them? It's another important story. If we go down, you see trends which we call political, like migration trends and global politics. As you can see in a few industries which are very sensitive to migration, like agriculture, for example, where seasonal workers are very important. Now we see the boost of another type of trends. You can see it opposite, like trends with new technologies and using robots, using driverless cars for agriculture, using drones, which could replace the people. But I'd like to go forward for tourist industry, and I think that this industry will face a real revolution in the nearest 10 years, the revolution of mobility, because you see that virtual reality and how people adapt and adjust to pandemic and to crises that we see tells us that idea of mobility is changing as itself. And I think the tourist industry will be a platform for showing how new technologies, new ICT technologies, new ideas of mobility could implement in our life. And a very important trend and group of trends, which is very close to tourist industry, smart city. And here we can see virtual technologies as well, and the problems of security. I think that a company, or maybe a country which could give a smart city, you know, like say we come to a city and makes it smart in 1 year or in 2 years, will be the new global leader. But they should take into account ideas about global security as well. We'll go up and see how sharing economy, and I've got another slide for this, and mobility is a part of sharing economy is changing. Some of experts think that the sharing economy will die because of pandemic in a big area of transformation, and I think it's still alive. 3D printing could also influence the idea of mobility of goods. And I think that it's also very important to see how financial and fintech technologies could influence mobility as well. So we come to climate change as it is, and for sure it's a very important block of global trends, and it's highly connected to ecology and to science and technology trends. But I'd like to stress your attention that this is just one part of a global trends that we see. a closer look to, from the same picture, a closer look to sharing economy and digital industry as it is. You can see how many different trends are here. And I think that if we want to elaborate a real agile and efficient policy for mobility, we should take into account not top 10 trends or top 20 trends as it's frequently we can see, but the whole landscape of a trends using science and technology enforced background for this. But we've got two wildcards. Wildcard is an accident with low probability but very high impact, like pandemic and low oil prices. And I think that real effects of such wildcards we will face not now, but maybe in the years. But they are really systematic and very, very profound. And I'd like to show you and to share with you the idea that maybe we are moving from conception of mobility as a service to conception of mobility as a philosophy. And I'd like to share with you 5 basic hypotheses and three key questions here. As you can see, we're really moving to a new production paradigm, 3D printing, Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, are doing very important from the economical point of view, very important thing. They actually kill the scope effect when you can get less expenditures when you expand or increase your production. And if we got 3D printing everywhere, the question will be not in the big corporations and big manufacturing services, but in supplement of such 3D printing. And you can see that in sectors like metallurgy or other sectors, they're really thinking that this could be a threat or maybe a window of opportunity for them. We see how global value chains are transforming, and I think that here now it's the right time to revise a global value chain and to see how we can enforce them or construct others. We always tell everybody that we are moving to knowledge-based economy, but now it's important to enforce it by action economy. Because if you just know, it's not enough. You should act and react very fast. And I think in this circumstances, companies which we call system integrators are very important. We see how changes in employment structure will face everybody. A few years ago, a World Economic Forum said that about 75 million jobs will be replaced by robots, so IT. But I think that really people are a very important part of an economic process, at least for nearest 10 years. But the problem and the point is in skills and competences that we've got. And it's very important to see what will be the new education model, because it influences mobility dramatically. Will it be a Zoom format or will it be old school format? We'll see. As for the three tricky questions, I think that almost all portfolios of technological leadership results are already known, but the question is who will be the first to implement them. It's very important to think about the motivation, and I think the question why and not how it's more important. And we face and we see how technocratic approach is struggling with socio-humanic approach and mission-oriented values of new generation. And another question which is very important is will artificial intelligence go deeper and deeper into our society and maybe replace everybody, or we are still moving to human-oriented ideas. Policy as itself to face such challenges and to manage, if a grand challenge could be managed, is facing their own agenda and their own challenges. I just emphasize a few. I think that external challenges for policymakers is very important to think about the selectivity, which field we support. Should we support everything or just some priorities? In this case, how to search and how to identify such priorities. Another question is concentration. Will it be some group or the whole institutions? Sustainability of financing is also very important, as well as institutional framework. Mobility of resources always a tricky question for policymakers, and it's very important to make them transparent and smart. In this case, maybe smart governance could be also a new global trend in policymaking. As we face different expectations from them, I mean from policymakers, is evidence, transparency, answering what-if questions using maybe scenarios and modeling, identification of weak signals, and trying to find smart decision. As a toolkit from another side, from the side of supply, we've got a lot of different multidisciplinary and multicultural research, integration of quantitative and qualitative methods as we do it in the foresight, blended foresight, big data analytics, for sure, stakeholder engagement and communications. And what I'd like to suppose, maybe we discuss it a bit later, but I think that if we want to move forward for mobility as a service or mobility as a philosophy into the future, we should start from a foresight for economy and for economic actors there, for stakeholders, go for priorities, then think about different maps, maybe technological road maps, how to draw it, implement it into tools, including research or human resources or governance, and the last but not the least, always keep an eye on global trends and what is moving, is monitoring and evaluation. Frankly, such construction for measure our foresights, and it's really very good to get on board. And my last picture is idea about how to interact, how to provide a strategy into such a turbulent world. It's a picture from children's book, and the question is very simple. Please identify who is doing wrong activity. You see that grandma is playing and mother reading the book, and children are trying to iron or to do some construction work. So the best answer, which really inspiring me, is everything is okay. Everybody is happy and they do their own activity. So getting to the conclusion, I think that in a situation that we see and that we face, we all could find our own niche. And I'd like to say thank you on the slide, and I'm ready to answer your question.
Alexander,
thank you.
Can you just show us the last picture that you were talking about? Because yeah, you stopped the screen sharing and we didn't see it.
Oh, really? Because I can see it. Can you see it now? Right now?
I can see it actually.
Okay, that's just for me.
All right.
We can also keep
Thank you for your attention.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander. If you stop screen sharing, then we can move into sort of the discussion mode and the question and answer mode.
Yeah, done.
Fantastic. Thank you very much again for giving us sort of the brave, far future that we might have. Maybe a quick question directly from my side. To what extent, when you paint now the future, having all the tools that you apply to see the map of where we're moving to, sort of what is the time scale from where, like, let's say, companies or organizations working in the mobility sector apply to? So is this something where you say this is near future? Do you see this more like as a tool to say where are we going to be in, I don't know, 10 years time? So how do you deal with the topic of time frame in that work?
Well, if we think about the effects of global trends that first 5-10 years, for sure some of them could be longer, like maybe neural interfaces, which is a very prospective medical technology, which is using now for recovery industry in medical sector, but It also could be used for everything. For example, it could be used instead of Zoom or video conferences or other kind of stuff. But generally, I think that from 5 to 10 years, it's a realistic period to face the trends that we see. For sure, it depends on the country, on the sector, on the society, and willingness of the society to get this trends on board. But I think that the mobility is moving to a more broad conception as it is, and it's going not only because of technologies like transport technologies or technologies for systems, smart system, and etc. But I see dramatic changes in society and people's behavior as it is. That's why I suppose that maybe we think in the future to get mobility as a philosophy, because the mobility could be not only as we used to think of it, but broader. Maybe if we've got this neural interfaces, there will be not a Facebook like a mind book, and there will be mobility of our minds and ideas. And as you know, people from a Facebook are thinking about this. So it's not a futurology; it's an optimistic forecast.
You mentioned the topic of wildcards, which I think is really interesting, because it seems wildcards are the ones difficult to see which ones will actually take place and in what extent. And what we definitely have seen, the impact of COVID-19 in the way of how we deal with mobility, especially in the connection of working from home. You know, it's a topic that has been discussed since, I don't know, decades, I guess. You know, we talked about teleworking and all these things, about all the regulations of workplace and so on. And I think with the situation we're facing since March, things have changed in such a speed and on a global scale. To what extent do you see are these changes or these impacts of such a wildcard sustainable impacts? Meaning, like, okay, this is the moment where you have sort of a leverage of a quality of mobility versus having more like a temporary impact and moving back to, let's say, the old normal after a certain time or in.
Well, I think that. Well, if previous decade we are trying, I mean the whole society of foresights or forecasters, that we're trying to identify global trends, and we thought that the nearest decade will be decade of global trends. Now I understand that it will be a decade for wild cards, and I think that we face a lot of them. Like, for example, resistance for antibiotic bacteria. It's a global wild card. It will be, for example, if we talk about people, it will be 120 years old persons, like in Japan. They are targeting it like a society 5.0 by 2030. So it's a target to get the average longevity to 120 years. It's a wild card, but it could be, and it's a wild card for mobility. Just imagine that people who are 100 and more years old are mobile. They have a good demand for mobile because of good medicine. They're quite active. They want to see everything, etc. It's also a wild card for infrastructure, a wild card for the services, etc. Because wildcard, it's not only negative, it also could be a positive. Even pandemic for manufacturing of sanitizing, that will be a positive wildcard, and will raise their revenues dramatically. You see. So I think generally that now we are in the area of wildcards. Another wildcard could be connected with agricultural sector. For example, from one point, there are a lot of different technologies that could raise productivity dramatically. From another, we see how food is moving, and it also influences mobility. Not only mobility of people, but mobility of of goods mobility, maybe of services and etc. So to sum it up, I think that we now face how global trends are providing us a wild cards, and the first step should be identification of the whole landscape of such global trends. I mean, values, political, technological, regulation, institutions, household behaviors, and then try to think what the wild card, another wild card could be, and we could face. I'm not telling that we could be insured 100% for negative effects, but at least we'll know that. If you know it, it's more or less easier to rule it and to manage it.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I would slowly like to move into the panel. Just before, if the audience, any one of you of the audience has any questions, just feel free to post them on the Q&A panel, and we will just raise them within our discussion. To move into the discussion with the panel, Katharina, as you have been visible first, let's give you a first question here. If you look at this, the foresight map that Alexander showed us, how do you see this also from the climate perspective? Also, when we look at the process he was showing, and then we have in this process we have the topic of priorities. And it seems to me that, of course, there's different entities, different bodies saying, okay, when mobility moves on and we look at the future of mobility, the different aspects we think of. And as I understand, you are a strong advocate in terms of climate change and really thinking about any changes or any activities we have in terms of mobility have to be considered under this aspect. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it was very interesting because Alexander talks from a very analytical perspective, and he looks at the trends that we can see in the world or in also research. But I think coming from my perspective, I'm more asking the question, where should we be going? And I think with climate change, and climate change is not a wild card because we know a lot about climate change. We know where we are heading when we continue to raise emissions like we're doing now, and not to stop emitting or stop burning fossil fuels. So I think there are a lot of questions to be asked also as a society. So where should we be heading? And I think from the climate perspective, it's always in a direction of less resource use and less emissions. And that puts forward solutions for transportation that could be different, but also similar to some things that are proposed when we look at mobility as a service. So if you can integrate more modes of mobility, this is such an that would be good in the future. So if you can take a bus and a train, and then from the train station you have the possibility to go by e-bike, or you can walk, or you can take a shared car or whatever. So this is something that can be very beneficial in terms of resource use, because maybe nobody owns a car, but we share those cars that are existing, and we move from individual transportation to public transportation. But also I think it's the question with how do we respond to the wildcards that we see. And you asked the question about COVID-19, and we've seen some positive aspects, yet now looking from the climate perspective, and some negative aspects. So what would be positive is that we all as a society now practiced to do things online, which is a nice thing, because you said before we were talking about it, but we were not doing it. So sometimes as a society, we have to practice things in order to get them through. So now maybe some people might have second thoughts about going somewhere by plane to have just one meeting or so and flying back. So that would be a positive for the climate. But on the other hand, we have seen that many people now rely on individual mobility because they are afraid of public transportation because of the virus and so on. So I think from my perspective, it's more the question of where should we be going and what things do we need to hold on in order to go there, and which things do we have to also unlearn or give other options or other alternatives to those things like individual mobilization.
Thank you very much. Isabelle, from the Commission point of view, when we look at the foresight and sort of the different options, so many changes basically from all different perspectives, from the transport sector now, how do you deal with this, and how far do you plan into the future around setting up the network, the regulations, and so forth?
So first of all, I think that what has just been said is very valid. It's the approach we have taken from the European Union with our European Green Deal. We have the mission, or we have the mission approach, and we have also adopted it for RNI. And so definitely we follow this mission approach. Having said that, we have announced in the Green Deal a lot of actions which is let's say a complete set of actions. So and mobility is transport are only part of it. And if we go deeper to it, the first action we will take is to issue a strategy in December. So you will see the new European Union mobility and transport strategy that we will issue in December. And again, we will go deeper in the action we should take. And definitely the European Green Deal is our Bible. And so, for example, we will try to address the transport and mobility system as a whole, but also we will try to improve the let's say each mode of transport, and then we will try to we would not call it a modal shift, but we would like to support the sustainable modes of transport, and it is in this area that we will try to support mobility as a service. I have not attended the previous session, but there, what does it mean, mobility as a service? And I like the proposal of Alexander that we should talk about mobility as a philosophy. I very much like this let's say proposal. But if we think about mobility as a service platform, we will also at DigiMove level, we will propose some workshops to brainstorm together to see what are the regulatory initiatives we have to launch. And one of it is to further work on the availability and accessibility of certain data, and also to see what are the necessary rights and duties of these mobility as a service platforms, to see to give trust to the mobility providers, because if you want to be a system integrator, and if you want to integrate mobility offers, you need to gain trust. And the third point is that we have also observed that maybe we can use another tool, which is the rules for public service contracts, and we could provide guidance on the local authorities on what they should put in when they launch their public procurement, what they should add to help mobility as a service providers to have all the details for example, access to ticketing services and so on and so forth. So I went from the bigger picture from the Commission to the little sector of mobility as a service.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Lukas, in your work, you're also dealing a lot with future-oriented issues regarding mobility in the urban context. To what extent do you see the change? To what extent do you see change taking place regarding new transport modes, and how do you see them in context of climate change? You mentioned the topic of previously the urban air mobility. Is this something that will improve sort of our climate targets, or how do you see that in this context?
Yeah, very challenging times. And coming from the urban perspective, smart cities, which was listed in the forecast as well, I want to mention that environment is not a trend. Every time you see these trend models with mobility, energy, environment in it, and environment is not a trend. This will last years over year, or year over year over year. It will follow us the next 100 years. So this needs to be implemented at the core of our doings, of our activities. So the Green Deal of the European Commission is perfect for that, because every project, every grant they pass has to be sustainable. And this is the same for the urban perspective. It's not a smart city, it should be a smart and sustainable city. Because what do cities need? Cities need to build a high quality for their people, and that's what's necessary. That what you bring in with high environmental standards and focusing on mobility. There are changes all over time. We have public transport, we have the private transport, and what's interesting in the whole conversations we have with mobility departments in Europe and worldwide is, if you talk to a responsible person in Rome, for example, he says, okay, I don't care about the Hyperloop. I have to fix my basic traffic problem, which occurs every day, and before I start thinking about Hyperloops, because this is at the habit, a core habit of the people. And if the mindset of the people doesn't change, mobility won't, because people are born to move. And that's what I think is missing in this whole conversation, is this people-centric approach. We can bring in technology, we can discuss regulatories, but they have to fit us. They have to fit the people. They have to fit the citizens, because in the end, they use the solution. And we can have sophisticated technologies, but if they don't affect the habitat or the habits of how we live and how we perform, nothing will change. And I like to compare this with the Formula One, for example, to stick to the mobility. 20 years ago, it was a win or victory was based on the mechanics and the skills of the driver. And then over the last 20 years, the sensors, now you have hundreds of sensors. The car is a computer. You just have to manage it right. And the same is within cities. It's a computer, open space, yeah? So you have sensors here, sensors there, and they can measure things, but nobody knows how to deal with it and serve the people right with this information.
Mm-hmm. I think the topic of user-centric and addressing the mindset of the population, I think is a really relevant one. And here I have a question to all of you. Where are we in terms of sustainable mindset of transportation? Is this something, like a chicken egg? From my point of view, it's sort of a chicken egg question. Is it the mindset that is asking for more cycling and active mobility, or is it more on the regulation side to also influence the mindset? How do you see? Where are we at in a time frame point of view, Katharina?
I put forward a referendum, so I'm always looking for politicians to do something. I think that the mindset is very, very important, of course, but I think this is shaped hugely by what possibilities I have. If I'm living in a very rural area, then my only mode of transportation might be my car. And if I'm living in a city that has roads that are built for cars and I don't have a cycling path, I will probably not cycle if I have a kid, if I have whatever. And for me, it was very interesting because when I went to some of the cities in Austria, in Vienna, we have a relatively good cycling infrastructure, but in some cities we don't. And then you are in a roundabout surrounded by 3 cars and you can't really go out, and you fear for your life because there are so big machines around you and you are just a person on a bicycle. So I think, yes, mindsets have to change, but also the way we design cities, the way the basic, if we have the possibility to use a train or a bus or whatever, if this is an attractive way to go around or not. I think those things change a lot in people's mindsets. And I see that in Vienna because we have a very good metro system. We have a very good public transportation system. And I think in Vienna, the next step would really be get the cars out of the city, because you are so fast with the public transportation everywhere. You're so fast with the bike everywhere, and maybe you need a car for transporting things somewhere or whatever, but that might be enough if you have something to, I don't know, to share a car with the whole district or whatever. But I think this needs solutions. And I think people are ready to change if you give them alternatives. But if the alternatives are not there, then it's really hard to change mindsets.
And yeah, please, Lukas.
Totally agree to what you said, partially. We are discussing this topic on a very, very luxury level. So we are on the forefront of anybody else in the world with Vienna, whole Europe, let's put it this way. So we are discussing if I can pass with 3 cars with my bicycle. Let's have Africa, Southeast Asia. You wouldn't think about taking a bicycle there, yeah, because it's so dangerous. So it's of course, it's a kind of the offer the city provides or the government provides, yes. But in developing countries, it's all about money. It's about who can pay for, or do I want, me as a government, do I want to have bicycles in my city? Because with a bicycle, I have only one person on a vehicle, or on a car, I have 5, 6, 7, yeah? So, this is so you have to build several levels here when it comes to the geographic areas. And I read one question, if I can answer this, because I think it's linked to my smart.
Yeah.
Is there, or what is smart, and what projects are smart in the city way? I cannot answer this question. There are lots of definition about smart cities, most of them also from the United Nations. You have the SDGs where they try to define something. There's lots of initiatives from the EU as well. Everybody's saying, okay, that's smart, that's smart. In the end, smart is not enough. As I mentioned before, it needs to be smart and sustainable. And the project is smart if it has a clear impact and makes life and the quality better in the end. This is how I would define it.
Isabelle, Lukas mentioned about the Green Deal in terms of any type of funding will have to be connected also to an evaluation regarding the climate impact. What type of measurements or analysis will take in order to understand if a certain mode of transport, for example, is sustainable and to be supported and which others not, in contrast to the need to be able to travel?
I'm not sure I understand completely your question. So I think that first of all, we have several programs, and so each program will have has its own rules, and so it depends on the details. But a sustainable mode of transport, we know them. So railways in most of the countries are sustainable. Traveling by bike, so projects linked to bicycle paths and so on and so forth, should be sustainable, should be climate, let's say, friendly. Having said that, if you renew your bus fleet and you target electric buses, this will be considered as a climate, let's say, friendly project. So this kind of activities, and I guess that this program will have its own, let's say, evaluation map or for all of that. So it depends on the program, but on the other hand, I think that it can be. It makes sense. I don't think that for transportation we will try to be fossil free. So this kind of activities, we need to take that into account.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Azrael is asking a question regarding this is likely a topic influenced by culture, but where does the user-centric approach balance out with the sustainable society goals, objectives? How can public authorities ensure both are met? So as I understand, there might be a conflict between the sustainable society goals versus the user-centric approach, clearly because you have one of the more society objectives to be met. On the other side, I have my personal objectives, my personal comfort zone that I not want to leave. How does that, or how should that match?
I can take it if it is, I can start. Basically, I think that you need both, because let's go back to the discussion before. We need to influence the behavior of the people and of the businesses. And so if you continue to focus on providing infrastructure, on providing services and if you see the people as a mass of people like we were in the past, we will not achieve, because what we need to do is to influence the mobility behavior. I think that it is in that sense, when we say user-centric, it is in that sense, is that I have a need to move and I am a commuter. If you, as managing, let's say, Brussels mobility, if you don't think about myself, my own needs, and if you don't talk maybe with your neighbor region, then you will not achieve my user need. So I think that it's a mix of both, and they are not contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can add something to this, I think if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, but also the climate aspect of it, I kind of disagree with what Lukas said before, because I think the goals are relatively similar. Maybe we are in different positions than many of the developing countries. But for example, in Europe, the people with the least income, they mostly don't own a car. So putting public transportation out there, giving people the opportunity to use transportation, but also active mobility, is in itself also fulfilling one of the Sustainable Development Goals for access to mobility, and it's also more climate friendly if we reduce our resources with which we transport as many people as possible with the least resources. And this also connects to another question I see here with electric vehicle use. Yes, e-mobility in itself, if we look at e-cars, those will not be the solution in themselves. We have to look at different modes of transportation. And I think the goal should be to transport as many people as possible with the least resources. So a car, if there is only one person inside, is a lot of resource, a lot of place that is taken away from other people if I just use it on my own. So we have to go into the direction of a sharing economy, but we also have to go into the direction that we kind of combine those modes of transportation better, because this is not a thing that is happening now, that we can actually take a train and a bus and afterwards go by bicycle somewhere else. So if we think about those modes of transportation, I think the solutions might be different for cities and for rural areas, but I think the solutions could be very similar in many parts of the world.
Lukas, you want to reply? Or Alexander, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that, well, global sustainable goals are very important, and we also respect them in Russia. But I think, well, I've just got an email from FAO organization, which is writing their agricultural forecasts. And you know, if in previous year, all forecasts and foresights made by World Bank, World Economic Forum, European Commission had around 1 or 2 sentences of disclaimer. So now the disclaimer is like this, you see, and everybody is writing that we don't know the consequences of pandemic, we don't know what will be with end of user innovations, etc., etc. But I think that one point will be very important in all this discussion is security. Not only security, but about cyber security, but the security as itself, like food security, economic security, safety as it is for person. And I think that anyway, we should revise or maybe at least make some emphasis on sustainable goals. They are really good, but they're very broad. And now they should be prioritizing by what we see and the effects that we face. And security maybe will be one of the factors which could be from the prism of which we could make such prioritizing. Thanks.
What we you know, going also back to the wild card with COVID, we saw, and Katharina mentioned, you know, the positive and negative effects. What we also saw is the rise of cycling since March, and at least in Vienna, I don't know how it is in other cities and countries. Many bicycle shops are completely sold out because so many people are buying bikes and start to cycle. And I'm cycling myself through Vienna every day. I see crowded cycle lanes. So we have not yet situations like Copenhagen, where I've heard there's also bicycle traffic jams. We're not there yet, but definitely we see a strong increase on that. How would you, I mean, ask this question already to Alexander before regarding work from home, but in terms of like use of mobility, of active mobility, do you see this as something that is here to stay in terms of once you get used to this type of new modes or active mobility modes, is something actually preferable over maybe some other things? Is this something here to stay, or do you see this as just a temporary topic? Anyone? Yeah, Alexander?
I can start. So I think as a trend it will continue at least nearest maybe 5 or 7 years, but I see there could be huge problems with business models, and we see how ideas of different business models and sharing economy are dying. I'm not saying that it's also a declining trend, but I think that will face a lot of difficulties. But anyway, my personal attitude is as a part of healthy lifestyle, it will raise and be more and more interesting. But another trend, you know, when we are talking about global trends, we sometimes could be like people who invest in pigeon mail, instead of investing in ICT technologies. And for example, virtual or augmented reality, which could also be a wild card for sightseeing or other kind of mobility, is also raising nearby. So maybe we'll also take a look there.
Maybe I can follow.
Please, yeah.
By saying that from our side, we believe that it will continue, and we believe it should continue. So because if we want to achieve our target set in our European Green Deal, we need to have such modes of transport, in particular in cities, but not only, because with the range that can be offered now by e-bikes, it can be used in a lot of environments. So we really want to promote and to support cycling in Europe. So for us, it's a trend that should stay.
Mm-hmm.
May I add something here?
Sure.
I also think that it will stay, but I want to mention something. We have a great playground in cities, in rural areas, where we can test lots of mobility or service opportunity in the mobility sector. Bird, Lime, this scooter transformation in the cities as well. Give them space, test them out. There will other solutions come up. But they need a space to test and to evolve over time, because we cannot only focus on bikes. But there are it is a good opportunity, a very good opportunity. But there are so many technologies out there, innovations, and companies, startups innovate to improve. They don't innovate to harm the environment. And this is why I like to just raise the voice, just to be more open for such technology, and don't shut them down immediately just because they fall or yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Katharina, you.
I think I agree to a certain extent, but I think this should be also followed by a very, very critical assessment of those technologies. So I am totally up for testing out new modes of transportation or good ways of getting around in a city. But I think with all those things, we also have to look at the footprint. So if we have new electric scooters, for example, we need batteries, and many of those scooters are needed or are taken for instead of walking. So they are not taken instead of a car, they're taken instead of walking. So a mode of transportation like walking that doesn't require any resources is then followed by a mode of transportation that needs a lot of resources. So I think I'm very open for technological change, but I think it has to be assessed very, very critically, especially if we talk about climate, and especially if we talk about tackling environmental changes.
Mm-hmm. Now we're in the discussion. This is great. I totally agree, and I didn't want to mention the battery before in my statement. I had the feeling this will come.
We'll come back.
I agree to the battery. It's the same with the e-cars and everything. But let's put it this way. Your example with avoid walking, take the scooter. This is not the case we want to have. Yes. But this battery technology, yes, there is a harm, especially in the recycling process, but it is a first step. The same is with hydrogen technology in the mobility. This is also not the super technology. And there was a question, is in rural areas, where do I park my car to come into the city? This is not the solution. There doesn't need to be an answer on that. This is, you don't, in the end, there should be a solution where you don't have to park your car, yeah? But mobility won't change 100% and not from day 1 to day 2. It will evolve, and I think we are, even though batteries cannot be recycled, or there's not the perfect technology for that right now, we are on a good way to tackle the environment issues step by step.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to further support what you have just said, because what I have not explained is that so we have the Green Deal, of course, and as I said, we have all our programs, and our RNI program, which is called Horizon Europe. We will have partnership to work on the different topics of zero mobility, of automated mobility. We have not talked about that, with the battery, with the hydrogen. So yes, and the topic of today, of this session, is transition. And I think that we need to also reflect where we are in the transition. Is it today, tomorrow, or in 10 years' time? And so what we need is to look at this transition path and to see if we are on the good way to achieve our mission.
I think I just want to clarify something. I'm not against electric transportation as such. I'm just against replacing one mode of transportation with a more resource-intensive mode of transportation. So if for example, we have e-bikes and we see in a study that they are replacing cars, that's good. Because for a bike, I need so much less resources. Even if there is a battery, we have a battery in a car as well. But like, we just need to really critically assess which modes of transportations they are replacing in reality, and further those that that are not intensifying the resource use that I have. Because if the footprint of a scooter, for example, I have in a city that will be bigger than me walking somewhere. So this is just what I wanted to put forward. We have to be very critical with those inventions and where they are put into place and how we can integrate this with other modes of transportations as well, so that they don't replace the wrong things, but further the right ways of transportation.
Absolutely. Alexander, yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few, and I agree with Katharina, because when we do a foresight, we see the whole technological chain or value chain, and that's very important. For me, for example, I was really shocked when I knew a few years ago, then if you want to process just one query, say in Google or another search machinery, you engage the power that could be enough to boil a teapot. Just one search inquiry. You see, from this perspective, we should see from the idea to the recycling, the whole production line, and maybe we see that other kind of stuff will be more efficient. So I strongly support Katharina's approach. But this needs in-depth understanding and foresight for mobility with the roadmaps, etc., etc. This is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as we are doing, as we're transitioning into the future of mobility, I think what Lukas was pointing out is the field of experimentation. So we have to also see, try out the new modes of transportation, see, what effect do they have? Are they sort of competing with walking or active modes? Are they actually a good sort of substitution maybe of car travel? So this is exactly some sort of field of back and forth of experimentation to understand how the right transition takes place. I would like to raise a question that Susanne sent to us already some minutes ago, and I'm just reading it out. I'm not sure that the question is which modes and services should be subsidized, but rather where a public authority provides subsidy, surely it should play a role in determining the delivery of that mode to ensure positive social and environmental outcomes. This is the case today with public transport tenders. Isabelle, maybe you can take on that regarding how do you see the topic of subsidy for transportation and also understanding the role of public authorities here?
Indeed. I think that this statement and question leads to the point that we might reimagine what means a public transport service. Indeed. And having said that, definitely we believe that the public authority, the public transport authority, but also the city, the public authority in a more global, let's say, way, they should be in the lead, and they should, yes, define what is the public service, definitely, and also that the subsidy should. I think that it comes back to the initial idea that it should be mission oriented as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
Okay, great. Lukas, I guess this could be a question for you from Azarel. how relevant is the development of technology in the future of sustainable cities in comparison with developing the basic infrastructure? In Japan, Netherlands, and some European cities, they have one of the best transportation systems in the world, which now is being updated through technology. However, in other places, there is a great interest in implementing new technology with a poor infrastructure, for instance, in Americas. So how do you see this balance between technology and infrastructure? Lucas, you are on mute.
Lucas.
Sorry.
So
no,
I can start. All right. So, I can say that around maybe 15 or 20 years ago, technologies were critical for development. But now I think that infrastructure in broad understanding, I mean, not only physical infrastructure, but also IT infrastructure and human capital are also very, very important. As we see in OECD estimations, they think that by the year 2030, human capital will be the only factor for competitiveness in their reports. Now it's technology and human capital. And I think that the level of infrastructure, it's the level of resilience, the level of being adaptive to new technologies is crucial in the nearest 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take on that, and I agree, and I want to give an example. Vienna, for example, is leading in the healthcare sector. So we have a very internationally a very well healthcare sector for all people living in Vienna. If we would go and improve this from the 90% to the 100, for me it's marketing. It's a marketing project. Why marketing? Because I could use these investments to put in the basic infrastructure in other sectors where it is more needed. And this is a political decision where it needs more involvement of the people, because people can tell you exactly this. If my mobility system in the Netherlands is good already, I don't need to go from 90% to 100 when I have a sector where I'm at 50% of my improvements.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's a question from Søren. How do we encourage modal shift from a car coming in from far away to urban-friendly transport modes? In Venice, it is easy. I think, Lucas, you mentioned it already, that you shouldn't even think about traveling by car towards the city.
This is a short time question. Yeah, now you should think of it, and probably the next 5 to 10 years, this will be an issue. But we should overcome this idea of using a car in the future and going really to this mobility as a service model, which we want to discuss, which is a great opportunity. And I want to come back to the last picture Alexander showed, where the people were doing their stuff. Yes, they were happy doing their stuff, but in the end, it needs collaboration. It needs not island solution, it needs collaboration between all stakeholders. And this is why we are here. We have the public sector with the private sector, we have organizations. They need to collaborate, they need to find the right way. I know this is the hardest thing on earth, to find this way. But in the end, this is how it works. This is co-creation, and this is how we will find the solutions for all questions just made.
If I may continue, because I may not fully agree to what you have just said, and sorry for that, I am not French, but I have followed the Gilets jaunes some months ago. And of course, we have a lot of people living in cities, but we still have a lot of people living around cities. I come back to the commuting, but maybe and you still need to have solution, and maybe the solution, we will not be able to provide public transport in rural area to help the people to join their jobs. So yes, we will We will try to push, let's say, carpooling, car sharing activities to join a certain point in time. But we might need a parking space for this kind of traveling, and then at multimodal hub, and then we can go in a city, because more and more, we have not mentioned it, but more and more cities are imposing urban vehicle access regulations. Sometimes we may even think about some bans, and we have talked about pedestrian zones. And so definitely parking space will be needed again in the transition. And I do not believe that we can go quickly to another model. So I think that parking space around cities might be a solution in short to medium term. It depends what is the term. To me, my term is 2050, according to the Green Deal. And I believe that we will need parking, but it is a personal thought.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander,
yes.
Yeah, so that's why my favorite topic is the foresight. You see, because before asking you about the quantity or the quality of parking spaces or urban life or non-urban life, we should ask what will be life in 10 years. Because, for example, in Russia, we see how people are moving because of pandemic. They're moving from big cities outside suburbs, and we've got a good internet connection, universities as well. It's great. So I've got my wine fridge here, barbecue, working place, heaven, you see, and I don't need a parking space. And that's why I think that before thinking about mobility as a service or as a philosophy, we should think about the drivers of mobility, economy and society and government, where this mobility will live. And after this, we can tell efficiently, do we need a parking space or we don't need a parking space?
I need to add something that I have not yet done, because you talk about forecasting, and maybe I am there is a link also to planning, and something that I have not yet mentioned is which is at the core of the urban mobility policy of the European Union, is the planning approach, which is we have provided guidance on how to plan with our sustainable urban mobility plans. And so indeed, you need to do this whole work of first thinking ahead, then consultation of your citizens, of your businesses, but also the citizens around you and the businesses around you. And then it's a long process, but yes, indeed, you're right. So we need to have this forecast plus planning approach, and then management approach. Yeah, indeed.
Katharina, you were raising your hand.
I think it's so hard to talk about like one solution to such a diverse problem, because I think we also have to look deeper than just, I mean, now we know that many people kind of drive to the city to work, but we also have to ask ourselves, why do they drive to the city to work? Are there not enough workplaces where they live? Can we design a city in order to people be living closer to their workplaces so they don't have to take a car or so? And also the transformation that has been going on for a long time is that, for example, in little villages, there is no vivid, good economy anymore because so many people live in those villages and travel to the city to work. So many small scale, I don't know, shops or whatever, they died. And now the people are just living there and they work somewhere else. So we have to also go to the root cause of the problem and see how we can design cities, how we can better maybe integrate more rural marketplaces again and regional markets and whatever, in order to also give, battle this. And the second thing I wanted to say is, I think there are so many different ways we can tackle those problems. Because, for example, in many villages in Austria that are very small, people tend to work at the same place because there's only one place around to work at. So not all the people need one individual car to go there. They might be taking the same car, but with 5 people. So I think those are many different ways to look at it. And I think discussing parking or not is not going in the right direction, but we have to really go to the root cause and also see how we can transform urban life and rural life in order to also be fit for the future and be fit to tackle climate change.
Thank you very much. I have to look at the time. We're actually at the end of our panel session, but before we close, I give you a challenge for your final statement. I have 3 words that you can interweave into your final statement. It's mobility as a service, it's collaboration, and it's transition. So these are 3 words, and I would like all 4 of you to give us a final statement before we close this session.
Can you repeat them? Sorry, I didn't write them down.
No problem. Mobility as a service, transition, and collaboration. It doesn't have to be 1 sentence, of course. Who wants to start?
I'll start with the picture that Lukas also talked about and that Alexander showed. I think everything in the future will be about collaboration, not only in the mobility system, but also in energy systems. There is a move towards everything as a service. We must move from production, like from product providers to service providers, also in the energy system. That's the same in the mobility system. And I think these solutions can be very fit for the future to tackle climate change, but they have to be very critically assessed, because not every mode of transportation, not every source of energy might be the most sustainable one. But I think with those concepts in mind of collaboration and thinking of things as services and interconnected networks might bring us a far way from where we have come with a lot of resource use to build up products.
Thank you.
I may have 1 sentence.
Okay, please.
Collaboration is building the foundation to an ecological and sustainable transformation, and mobility as a service is playing an important part in this whole process.
Great. Alexander, you, please.
Yeah, well, as you asked, just 3 words: people, technology, freedom. That's all.
You have to repeat it because there was an interruption. People, technology.
So just 3 words: people, technology, freedom.
Okay. Isabelle?
Again, depending on how we define mobility as a service. But in any case, we know that to provide mobility as a service, we will need partnership, we will need cooperation, we will need collaboration. And in any case, we will need to do that. We will need that to make sure that we are in the transition to the target we have set to be climate neutral by 2050. Perfect.
Thank you all for participating. It was a great discussion, great inputs. Thank you so much. We are now at the end of our Fluidtime Symposium. I will just share once more our last slide. So we are at the end of our 3rd session and the end of our 5th symposium. Just for all the ones we are not part in this morning, when I gave an overview of where we are heading to in like the transition of the Fluidtime Symposium, so to speak, I just put that back into the slides here. So basically, originally, knowledge and experience was the plan to put together in one event in May 2020. And of course, now we had to change it. So we had a fantastic exchange inputs today from different perspectives, from different experts. So I think we are well prepared for our future of what it means about collaboration in the MaaS ecosystem. In the next couple of months, we will work on different ecosystems. We work together with ambassadors representing different types of regional, local MaaS systems, and we will meet together, hopefully in person, next year, 2021, most likely in the mid of the year, September, something like that, to then basically take on the symposium in its 6th edition, where we have where we work on the MaaS ecosystem canvas with different players and really do more planning on that sense. If you want more information, just visit our website. We have a menu there called Knowledge Hub, where you also can get more on that. And with that, I want to thank everyone again for participating. Have a good evening and good travel if you have to travel back home. Bye-bye, everyone.